to yet another episode of Startups Streamlined with Thompson Hine. I'm Lindsay Carascenzel. I'm a partner in the New Ventures Practice Group. And this week, we are talking all about government contracts. So this week, I'm joined by one of our teammates out of the DC office, Mona Dabi, and she is going to answer lots of questions related to government contracts, government contracting, and how can that be used to grow or impact your business. So the US government could ultimately be your next customer across several industries. This session here today, we're going to explore the federal government marketplace and why that's so appealing to companies looking to expand their businesses and business pursuits for consistent, stable revenue while delivering goods and services to the federal government to meet their missions and needs. So here we're going to talk a little bit about what makes the government marketplace attractive to expand your business, considerations in entry to the federal government marketplace, and taking advantage of your size and some of your government contractor responsibilities. So I think the government contracting space is often a space that gets overlooked by a lot of companies, big and small. So it doesn't really matter where you are in the spectrum. I think people just think government might be hard to manage and deal with. But I think we often forget that the party that always is going to pay their bill once you've got a contract is the government. So sometimes it is worth it for that steady cash flow and income. But without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our guest of the month here, Mona. Mona, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. I'm very excited for our discussion. It's going to be a fun one and hopefully clarify some of the things that you highlighted with the confusion, so to speak, from the GovCon marketplace for like non-traditional contractors.
I love that you call it GovCon. Like, I feel like we should dress up or, you know.
That's the lingo. Yeah, there we go.
Fun. Okay, so we're going to just kick it off with the first topic that we were mentioning there. What makes the government contract marketplace an attractive arena to expand your business or your company's line of revenue?
It's a really good question. As we've seen with like the Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, and the CHIPS Act, the federal government is looking to engage more and more non-traditional government contractors than ever before. We always tell our clients, would you rather have 3 legs to your stool or 4, right? So like you said, doing business with the government or in the government marketplace can provide a reliable and consistent revenue stream. We always say the US, I would honestly say every government, every stage, like local, state as well, but federal government in particular, we always say the US government's the best customer in the world. They have the most needs. It's different than the commercial marketplace in the sense that you don't need to, for lack of a better term, lowball how much you are proposing to offer your goods or services. The government will pay top dollar for top quality. And that can, lead to really exciting projects that you can then in turn advertise or, use for your commercial enterprise business transactions as well. So, the key is kind of figuring out your sweet spot. Like, what are you really good at? What product are you really good at delivering? What service are you really good at delivering? Once you identify that, then it kind of, becomes plug and play for you, for the company, finding the agency that is going to be most susceptible to whatever you're providing. And, I'm answering this question from the perspective of a company that hasn't done much government work or doesn't realize that they've done government work. We tend to find that a lot of companies are in the government supply stream. They just don't know it because they're like lower down. And so, that can also provide, interesting teaming arrangements and whatnot down the line with different companies. But as I was saying, finding your sweet spot, finding the agency, those are the 2 keys. And then from there, it kind of is just, what is best for you. Because it's, again, not about a price for the government. It's top quality. And they don't know what they don't know. So a lot of the times it's also, in addition to the government issuing like RFPs and stuff, we've helped clients approach the government themselves and say, hey, we think that you could benefit from what we have, and here's why. And that just starts like a dialogue with the government. Like you said, people get confused. I know I was when I first started practicing in the space. I don't know if you've seen the movie War Dogs, but I always compare it to that movie, right? Like I thought all they do is like defense contracting, and that was really the bread and butter of the government. But they do a lot of other cool initiatives and projects, like R&D work and all that fun stuff as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tentacles to the government, right? I think that's what a lot of people forget about. It's not just DOD. It's, you know, there's
Yeah,
a million different arms that you
agencies.
could ultimately think about. So one of the things that I thought you said was interesting there was that the government is looking to work with different types of entities. So can you sort of shed some light on size, like why it might be important for the government to work with some quote smaller business entities or WBE or MBE
Yeah.
type of entities? I think that would be really significant.
No, that's also a really good question. So I think on the invite we said like take advantage of your size. So the government in recent years has and prime contractors too. So it's not just the government. So the bigger prime contractors, they have initiatives to use as many small businesses as possible. There are a number of contracts, they're called set asides. So they're like literally set aside for a smaller business. Now the business can be you determine that size status by like either your number of employees or your revenue in a given year or over 3 years. It depends on, it's called the NICS code that's assigned to you. You probably have heard of it. That's assigned to you when you first register. So again, the size status, determining that it's important, but there's also, as you alluded to, different distinctions within the size category itself. So like service disabled veteran, women-owned business, minority-owned business. If you're a business that operates in what's called a hub zone, so it's like a distressed economic area the government's trying to, bolster up. So, taking advantage of the programs that are out there to try to put you kind of in the front of the line when they issue RFPs or when they're looking for a bigger contractor to team up or mentor or protege. That's another contract program where a bigger company will mentor you and get you up to speed. There's joint ventures too. Again, it just depends on what fits your business best and your goals best in the long term to protect your. We always tell clients what we do is to protect your valuation, or so we're not trying to be like a cost center.
Sure.
So in the short term, it may seem like a cost center, but it's to protect you long term. So when you do get to that, hopefully the whatever M&A stage you want to be at, your IP, your little golden egg is protected as possible.
Cool. Okay, so kind of sticking along that vein, what are some of the business opportunities or angles that startups or small businesses looking to enter the government marketplace could utilize?
Well, like I said, take advantage of your size for sure, but that also comes with what type of government vehicle are you dealing with, right? So I always think of public procurement work in two buckets. I call it solicited and unsolicited, which I alluded to a little bit earlier in our discussion. So solicited is like RFPs. You're probably used to it in like the commercial enterprise world, right? So like a company or the government will issue an RFP or an RFI, request for information, just putting a feeler out there. A lot of the times, companies know about it, but sometimes they don't know about it. So it's kind of knowing what databases and tools to look into. And that also goes to the agency, right? So and with that is the contract vehicles. Like I said, there are some contract vehicles that just go towards unsolicited. So like they're called FAR-based contracts, FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation. That's like the regulatory framework that controls or oversees public procurement, all public procurement. And they're a little bit more rigid. So the pro for smaller companies that are a bit more, they're getting their feet wet or toes wet, so to speak, is that it provides a lot of like remedial measures. But there are a lot of compliance requirements as well. And then there's, what we call the like FAR-based contracts, which are like grants and CRADAs and cooperative agreements, and that's more like R&D, prototype development work. There's like a new contract vehicle called OTAs. So like a lot of the government programs that are coming out under the Infrastructure Act, IRA, and CHIPS Act are utilizing like grant contract vehicles more than FAR-based, and that's just because it's quicker, provides flexibility for the company. So especially for smaller companies, it allows for you to negotiate certain requirements. Be like, hey, this isn't required. We don't want it in the contract. So that's important to remember. If it's in the contract, you're required to abide by it, even if it's not applicable to you, which can be very confusing. And a nightmare, because we don't ever want to get you to a false claims act or any type of those. No, that's not where we want to be. In addition to a legal nightmare, it's a PR nightmare. So there's different opportunities out there is what I'm trying to say. Definitely taking advantage of your size. I will say something that we always flag for smaller companies is something called the Federal Supply Schedule, FSS. It's under the GSA. That's the General Services Administration. The GSA is responsible for procuring all products and services that all the agencies need. And it's like a catalog, essentially. So you have to get up to speed, you get accepted into the FSS, and then you're like in the arena, so to speak. And then you can like pull task orders and stuff like that that may meet what you're trying to provide to the government. Yeah.
So I guess I'm wondering if there's some folks who are out there that are listening or watching this after the fact. Is it through this FSS that you can sort of wed your way into the government marketplace, or is there a different pathway that you tell people to take? What does the actual process look like for that?
I would say, again, it depends on what you're providing, right? So there's some people that I hate to always use this example because we lawyers love it, but like a widget, right? Like something that is like commonly used, or like a mechanical pencil or something. The FSS would be perfect for you because it's a catalog, right? So you just go in there and search, oh, does the government have a need for what I'm looking to provide? There's another, like I'm working with a prospect right now that they provide like Social Security and benefit assistance to veterans. That probably won't be in the FSS, right? So, but again, it's finding, like I said in the very beginning, finding your sweet spot, and looking at FSS is always the first step that I recommend, because it can kind of just inform you to like, what's the government looking for? Like you alluded to, if you're looking to just get your toes wet and do like a smaller, like don't bite off more than you can chew. I always tell clients that too. Start off small with the government, build up from there. It's definitely the government arena is somewhere, is a place that you should take full advantage of, but do it slowly and do it right, and it'll pay off. So yeah, the FSS is a good place again, but I would caveat that and say identify your sweet spot first. But it doesn't take, it's not hard to look. So the website is gsaadvantage.org or .com. And you can literally just go like type in like keywords of what you want to, like a tile. I had a client that wanted to provide like bathroom tiles and happened to be on there because of all the utilities facilities that they were looking to construct. Like what I viewed as random when I was first started off is, the government's looking to procure it all, and that's a very good first step.
Yeah.
So good job highlighting that.
Yeah, and quite frankly, they, as long as you do the thing, they pay the bill. Like the government is good for its money, which we can't unfortunately always say about our other vendors or customers, right? So, in some respects, like this almost sounds too good to be true, right? Like you apply, you get in these, you get in these veins, you get on the FSS, you get in whatever bucket you're supposed to be in. You start small, continue to grow, and the government just pays your bill. And they don't really fight you on the cost. They want best quality. So is it safe to say that companies shouldn't treat their government customer like any other enterprise customer? And maybe if that's true or not true, what are some of the considerations businesses looking to enter the marketplace should be thinking about if you've got this great customer who's always going to pay their bill, assuming
Yeah,
you get in the system.
get the stuff done how they want it. And also I will caveat, they will pay their bill. They have to, because the government can't accept anything for free. They're just federally not allowed to do that. So there's like it's not a bright line test, as we say in the legal field, but it's like a general rule. If it's over $25, the government's got to pay for it. So they're required to pay. Sometimes if there's like a government shutdown, it can get lagged, but you will always get compensated at some point, sooner rather than later. And, to go to your other question, no, you shouldn't treat the government customer like your commercial enterprise customer, mostly because the government will have, I would say, a little bit more additional compliance requirements attached to when you accept federal funds, which is kind of normal. Your commercial, we see it all the time, commercial enterprise customers will also attach TNCs to different purchase and task orders and whatnot. So it's kind of the same, but their requirements are going to be a little bit more nuanced, right? And a lot of the times it's just determining whether something applies to the business, to the contractor. And that goes back to your size. So knowing your size can also help. Small businesses are a lot of the times exempted from quite a few of the requirements, but the government will always punt the ball, so to speak. And so it's up to you to and up to us to help you, right, to
Sure.
navigate that world. But I would say that the overall gist of it's kind of the same, which is just protecting your IP, protecting your golden egg, or and the valuation of your company long term, and trying to mitigate business and legal risks. I would say the three big buckets that I always flag for clients that are looking to get involved in the space is IP, domestic content, and like being responsible is what they call it under the FAR. So IP, said it before, protect it as much as possible. The government will try to get the government won't outright take rights in your invention, right? But if something has been developed over the course of a government contract, they could have certain rights to it. That's about you can negotiate how much rights they have to that. You can always license your stuff to the government too, and they'll pay for it. Again, they have to pay for it. And a lot of the time, it's also just monitoring, right? Making sure that there's not like an unauthorized disclosure, which we've also helped clients in the past. And if that is found, the government we've had clients, they get compensated for it because, again, the government can't take anything as a gift or for free. So that's one. Then domestic sourcing and content. I always flag this one because it's kind of relatively new. It's always been there. You've probably heard of like Buy American, Buy America.
Yeah.
It's really big under the Infrastructure, IRA, and CHIPS Act. It's a very big initiative of President Trump and President Biden. I would say President Biden continued on with what President Trump was doing. And that's a lot of the focus is just bringing back jobs to the US, bringing back our manufacturing capabilities. The Ohio region is really hot for that right now, which is really great. But the domestic content and sourcing requirements are becoming a little bit more cumbersome, a little bit more intensive. But the government is also having funding programs to help companies bring them back to the US, bring back their, reshore is what they're calling it, their supply streams and manufacturing capabilities. So I just flag that to let clients know that, not all supply streams will be like X'd out if it's not in the US. But and a lot of startups do have their manufacturing capabilities in China because for price point purposes, but it can create some hindrances down the line. But again, the government has programs that we can help get you some funding to help you like re-mitigate or re-audit. And then the third consideration is what the government calls being responsible. It's what's called under the FAR, a responsible contractor. I think of everything in buckets. So this is also two buckets. This is like performance and financial. Can you perform the contract or the purchase or task order? And if you can perform it in the way that you've agreed to perform it with the quality and schedule and all that stuff, are you financially responsible? Are you going to be able to responsibly manage the federal funds that the government's going to give you? Sometimes there's like cost accounting stuff that goes into it. Some contracts require like having a cost accounting system. I've helped clients set them up before. Just like basically you like internal controls of separating out your commercial funds with your federal funds. And those two combined is what informs you being a responsible contractor. And I should have caveated this. The performance piece also brings in the compliance requirements, right? So, you know, if you're responsible for performing, that's assuming that you've also fulfilled all the TNCs, which are the compliance regs that you have agreed to.
Okay, so super interesting. I'm just thinking about, I think a lot of times when startups hear compliance, they go, I can't do that, right? That's too much. And I mean, basically what I'm hearing here is it's more operations and process maybe than it is compliance. But is there an additional layer of like reporting that you have to send to the government or anything like that happens? I have no idea.
Yeah. I wish there's a more clear-cut answer. But again, it depends on a number of things. But yes, there are reporting requirements under the FAR. Depends on if the clause is applicable to you, like under the affirmative action requirements. You may have to submit something to OFCCP. A lot of the times they're like forms that you have to submit. If things go wrong or awry, or you notice or detect something, like there's forced labor stuff that's coming in. So if you notice one of your suppliers, so that can become cumbersome for contractors too, right? Especially on the smaller or companies that aren't like in the marketplace or well versed, is having to monitor their supply streams. I've noticed that to be a pressure point for a lot of clients. But that's just sending out like a survey and having like them fill it out. You may have received one yourself if you're tuning in, and now it's clicking as to why you received it, right? It's just kind of, I don't want to say punting the ball, but you try to just gather as much information as possible, good record keeping practices, and the government will work with you, right? If you flag something like, hey, we might not have met this, we might have missed this. So I call it all CYA measures, right? So yeah, there are reporting requirements, but a lot of it, again, is determining whether it's applicable to you, and that's its own exercise. And even if you're not a contractor yourself, if you're in the supply stream, you're probably getting flow down provisions in your agreements with your commercial customers that are providing something to the government that you may not know about. So it's also just realizing and recognizing that, oh shoot, I have seen FAR clauses before and we didn't really like realize it, right?
Yeah. Okay. So super, super interesting, both for folks that are doing the government contracting directly and being impacted by it indirectly. So very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So coming up on the tail end of this here today, but if a business entity is considering entering the government marketplace, could you give them just one piece of advice? And if you can't give one, what would that piece be?
Very good question. I would say do it right. So, I started off with finding your sweet spot on purpose. Once you find that, you can really hone in, because the government procures everything that you can think of. And so finding what you're really good at and building your reputation within the community, with the government, other companies, is paramount. And again, the concept of do it right seems simple, but the execution is where it can get a little bit complex. And that's where we come in. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to shameless plug for us, but that's also, your internal personnel as well all contribute to that, making sure that you're delivering top quality and top services or product, whatever you're providing to the government. And just continuing to build your relationship with each, like at bat, so to speak, with your reps. And if you do it right, it can provide that fourth leg to your stool instead of having the three. And again, it's like you've highlighted, consistent stream of revenue. And a lot of investors like hearing that companies have what we've noticed that recently, that they have government, because again, it's consistent revenue and it provides some type of additional assurance for them that the company will hopefully be successful. So, it's always been my view that if I do my job right, bad for us kind of, but you won't need us as much.
Sure.
And I really do believe that, because my job is to make sure that you're able to do this, and I'm in the trenches with you, no pun intended, right? And whether you're in the government marketplace full-time or you're a supplier part-time, our efforts and commitment remain the same, and it's making sure to help you do it right.
Yeah, love that. So speaking of the trenches, one of the questions or comments out in the chat, and if you have any other questions or comments, please drop them in. But this person is interested in selling to military exchanges, both domestically and overseas. So if they were going to do that, what's the pathway that they would take? That, assuming they've never interacted with the government exchange, DoD, nothing.
Yeah, very good question. I mean, I always say check FSS, GSA Advantage, because they also procure for DoD. DoD has its own search functions as well to see if like what you're looking to provide is actually, there's like an RFP out there or the government's interested in already. But that's not a dead end, so to speak. If it's not listed in one of those like catalogs or search engines, you can always approach the government and say, hey, this is the thing that I'm looking to provide. And I think, it'd be beneficial to meet your alcohol. So by military exchanges, I'm going to assume you're talking about US. If it is, and if it's with like a US base, whether it's in the United States or international, you can always try to sell, and we've helped clients in the past get contracts with commissaries on US bases. Yeah. Which can be a really, and that's quasi-government. That's a little bit, it's a little bit easier for companies that aren't as well versed in GovCon to get into the marketplace that way. So that may be an opportunity area. I'm assuming that's what you're asking, based off what's in the chat box. But a commissary may be a really good starting off point. And just to see, again, it's hopefully a commercial item, which a lot of the requirements hopefully won't be attached to it, and seeing if that's something that the government can support in their commissaries, again, right, is making sure that they're able to have those goods on the bases. Some countries don't allow for alcohol, and especially in the Middle East. So depending on where the base is located, where you're looking to provide it, we can try to find some like opportunity zones for you.
Cool. All right. Well, if there's any other questions that continue to pop up here, we will follow up with you separately in email. So naturally, all of you out there, thank you so much for joining us here today. And a special thank you to Mona here for joining us and sharing her obvious GovCon expertise with the masses. So Mona, thank you. Super, super grateful for your time here today. You will receive, after this is over, a quick couple question survey asking how you felt about today, and then more significantly, what are some of the additional topics you'd like to learn more about so that we can continue to provide content and information that's helpful for you. So again, Mona, thank you. Appreciate you so very much. And for all of you out there, you can check this out too on our Thompson Hine YouTube channel. So don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so that you can see our continuous updates flowing through there. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your week here, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.